So, this is a question that somebody had asked me a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember her name, but I think anyway, the main thing is the question was with War Academy, let's imagine for a moment that you were wanting to go through the fire crystal tech tree and you don't want to spin. How do you do that? So, the biggest issue in fire crystals is you need one element, which is fire crystals, right? And the other element is steel, because you're researching, right? Now, the big no-no is don't use all your steel so that you get your shards. Because you can notice you're going to burn 5,000 steel for just one of these. Whereas if you burn 10 of these, you get 13 of these. So the value of fire crystals is in the shards, okay? So then the question became, well, which one do I do first? Do I do my marksman? Do I do my lancers? Or do I do my infantry? Now, I'm of the opinion, okay, if you want to spend the least amount of resources possible, lancers are probably not a bad idea because they're the last ones to ever get hit. And that's going to make you a better defender. So in general, if you want, like, which one probably ought to be done first, I would recommend lancers, okay? If you're wanting to be not so worried about cost, then I think marksman makes more sense in the sense that you're going to be able to bring their wall down faster. You're going to be able to kill them that much faster. So marksman makes more sense. But if you're somebody that you're more like me and you're like, I just like being a giant toad. I like having a bunch of infantry. And I don't care. I just want to have less of my troops be susceptible. Even though I might have some weaker lancers and marksmen in the back, I'm going to be the big steel wall with my infantry. So let's say you are going to go this route. The one immediate issue that a lot of people don't realize is we're talking about tens of thousands of fire crystals that are going to be required in order to be able to make this possible. Plus, you have research time on top of this. And notice that this is wanting 93,000 in steel, not counting resources. So this is one of those things that, for most people, okay, you're either going to go down the War Academy path or you're just going to keep on trucking along and keep upgrading your furnace. And is there a wrong answer here? I think so. If you go too crazy, I feel like what you'll end up doing a lot of the time, and especially if you're like me, it's very, very easy to get into a habit of basically burning all of your crystals on the furnace, but then completely ignore what would be your T11 troops. And most people in PvP know that if you run into someone with T11, you're going to need also probably the heroes to back it. That is to say that if you're going to go about that route, like, you're going to want to have, best in slot heroes, best in slot gear, and so on, right? So, when you're looking at this and you're wanting to know, like, okay, so what's the best way about going to do War Academy? Well, you need fire crystals, and you need them in any place you can get them. So, that means what I would recommend you do, all right, is you're going to want to pay very close attention to every event that comes up for fire crystals. Now, I can name a couple of times where, like right now, State of Power is going on, so you can turn around and use your Sunfire tokens in relation for fire crystals, and there's really not a really bad option there. You might be like, oh, but what about freaking this? Like, if you go through this, you're going to get some extra needed gear pieces, with Bear. If you're going through Alliance Championship, contrary to what you may believe, this is mostly for your gear pieces, but outside of that, you're thinking, all right, so you've told me two places where I clearly don't get fire crystals. So where am I going if I want fire crystals? Well, you'll notice in the shop that, for whatever reason, it's not anywhere to be found, right? You're not going to find them in any of the shops. You'll find them in State of Power. So if you win, you can get an extra 50 and then some in change, right? But for the most part, you really don't have very many places where fire crystals are going to be available. And if you look at like the crystal laboratory, for example, you get to refine some with resources every day, and then you can also make super refinements so that you can get your furnace upgraded, right? But most of all of that effort devoted towards getting fire crystals, then ultimately you've only got a couple of other places to look, which, as a lot of people have picked up, crystal reactivation is probably one of the few places where you can turn around and basically dump gems, like so. And then what you can do is you can go and grab, a 50 stack, for example, and get some fire crystal chests. And that gives you a chunk of much needed fire crystals. Now, I'm not really on the fence by any means, but it's like, yeah, you can conceivably spend, for 500 of these, right, is $50. So you could conceivably go down the money route. But most people that I know will look at that and just cuss. Because, here you got $5 and there's 55. If you look around, you'll see that there are other places where if you spend, hey, what do you know? Those fire crystals, they're everywhere. And this is oftentimes kind of the appeal is, what they want you to do is spend to get the fire crystals. That's ultimately where they're wanting you to spend your time. But you'll notice that one of the things that was nice about Emporium is, hey, Thorn of Enigma crystals. So that's an opportunity to, turn around and convert those crystals from the thorns that you get, But more than anything, guys, that is, in my opinion, where you've really got to kind of devote a lot of your effort and attention to is pay attention to where fire crystals become available. Because you'll find them in events like Frostfire Mine, you'll find them in Emporium of Enigma. If you rank, for example, in the leaderboards, occasionally you'll notice that if you look at the view rewards, if you are ranking in there, hey, what do you know? Fire crystals. But again, it's all about if you're going to start ranking in there or you have to be planning these things. You can't just kind of jump into it and expect it to just work out either. Now, of course, if you do even the bare minimum with point rewards, right, you can grab some extra added needed, charms and designs that way too through Castle Battle. But if anything, people often will poke around and heck, I've seen people, what they'll do is they'll go over into Arena, and you wouldn't think that going through this would mean almost anything, but it actually isn't really that bad. Because you can upgrade your heroes as you go through and hit battles. It's definitely something you want to make sure you're doing, because a lot of people, I think, get into a habit of not doing their arena. They just kind of get tired or bored of doing it. And that is kind of a reasonable feeling, to say the least, because of just how it is set up. Where, if you're not like someone like Pluto, who has everything maxed out, there is a ceiling there. So, I would say, if anything, one of the most underlooked places for gaining fire crystals, if anything, right? If you want where they're actually at, it's really in intel missions. Like, if you want to get the fire crystals that you are going to need to be able to get to 11s without spending, and you want to get there as fast as possible, you need to be doing your intel missions if you aren't already doing them. Because this is primarily where you're going to get those fire crystals that you're going to need. Plus, Blood and Fang will come around, and then that'll even give you even more fire crystals. And again, like I said, a lot of it is event-based. That's where a lot of your effort needs to be spent, though, if you want to be able to get these things for free, that is. And I don't know exactly how long it's going to take. It's probably going to take several months. I wouldn't be surprised if I never even get this completed on all three in even a year's time. I would expect that even trying to get Helio's infantry in the next 3 months might look more like, you got to remember, you've got to have 1,000,000 steel. So, I mean, not on top of all the other upgrades, and you're only getting 30k steel from exploration, then you got to go through and do exploration occasionally. And you've got to make sure you're doing this too, because this is going to determine, so much of what you've got to do in order to even get anywhere. So in a lot of ways, you're not, how do you say, you're not helping yourself if you aren't doing this already. It's one of those things that, unfortunately, in this game, I don't feel like, you can spend to your heart's content if you'd like, but the biggest thing here is, as you work your way up, you'll notice that by having done that, that still doesn't really change the problem. The problem being is you got to get through the boss stage. But if you pay attention to it, you'll notice that this is one of those things that gradually does actually get more difficult as you work your way up the level, too. Which is, the other half of the battle is, you've got to be able to have higher quality heroes, and you've got to have them leveled up, and you've got to go in through and do all the upgrades, and it's a bloody mess most of the time. Because now, looking at that, you notice that number still hasn't changed. But if I hit the boss now, and let's assume I'm even able to, surpass it. And again, that's a tricky thing in and of itself, because sometimes you're just not going to get that lucky. In this case, I think I can get through it probably without much trouble, but that's partly, because I figured I'd show you guys what I mean by this. Okay, but like once you go through it, now if you notice, it's 3350. I've only increased the amount of steel I gain per hour by 10. This is where I'm like, this is hopeless. That is how I feel. Now, it's not that you shouldn't try and go up through the exploration, but that is something that is so disheartening when you look at it and you're like, oh, I did all that effort only to be told, here's 10 steel. Like, what? You could have given me 100 steel, 1,000 steel, 10? So, in any case, guys, I may bicker, but like, if anything, guys, this is where I feel as though, if you want to take advantage of the next event, it's coming up in Thanksgiving, and it's come up in the past, and it always does. And primarily the idea here is, it's just like what I was telling you about with the Oktoberfest event, which is Halloween. It's the same principle, except this one will probably not be as good in terms of what you'll gain in rewards and everything. I mean, you'll get like an access to like the turkey's March skin and some other stuff that's nice. Which, if you're wondering, what's that? What's the turkey? What are you talking about? You're talking about things I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, for those of you who've been playing, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, all right, I'm referring to this thing that it's kind of a weird skin, and I'll show you. And it's honestly, when I first saw it, it kind of made me chuckle, because I just can't help but it's a turkey. It's let me tell you, man, it's something else. But I know that's coming around the corner, so just pay attention for that. Of course, there are some other skins in here, which I'm sure some people are probably wondering, like, how do you go about acquiring these? I don't like a lot of the items in here. You've got private chat, you've got name, marching, and you've got, heck, even this, you got different march skins and stuff like that. I don't have this one, but I believe you acquire this during the Chinese Lunar Year, if I remember right. But, like, yeah, some of these I don't even have them unlocked. Like, Valentine's Day is one of them. And there's, still some stuff here that I know, and they occasionally add, so it does occasionally get, how do you say, there's always options out there, right? But, for the most part, guys, that is pretty much the gist. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.